It's go time.
Welcome to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble with your host, Don Charbin, with special guest Ben Grant of TSN 1050 and co-host of the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome everyone here to Quick Kicks here on Third Down Gamble. Don Charbin along with my very special guest, Ben Grant, who happened to be here last year. Great to talk to you again, Ben. It's always fun to talk football when we're heading towards the season.
Yeah, exactly. I know it feels like it's just around the corner. I'm always happy to talk to you any time of the year, but yeah, this is the best time of the year.
It is. It's kind of like Christmas is coming, and we know that there's going to be a lot of presents under that tree. Granted, the tree is divided into 9 different stadiums.
Yeah, that's right. But you're right. This is such a strange league because we're looking forward to the draft. And it's like 5 minutes after the draft's over, like camp is starting, we're all out and everything's firing, and then 2 seconds later the season starts. Once that draft hits, those couple of weeks that we're in now before draft time, it really does feel like the clock starts speeding up.
You're exactly right. It's all about when the NFL draft is, and there's so much compression that goes on after with the CFL. It feels like, as you say, you finish the draft, everyone walks out the door, and they're climbing on a bus to go to camp.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I know. I feel for some of these guys. Like I know, having talked to some players and some prospects over the years, like they know the timeline, but it's highly stressful because they don't know what city they're off to. These guys, they're hoping to get drafted, they're hoping to be in a good situation, but they don't know. They have no idea, or if they're going to be picked up as a UDFA or whatever. And then 2 days later, oh, I'm off to Vancouver or Calgary, Edmonton. Could be anywhere. Probably not ideal. I'm sure the players, truthfully, don't really like that. I kind of at the mercy of where the NFL draft is, because it really does impact, especially now with so many Canadians that are not just eligible for the NFL draft are being talked about, but high picks over these last few years, and this year's no exception to that too. So, you have to wait and see who's taken by the NFL. Where did guys sign as undrafted free agents, and that will impact their draft stock.
Exactly. And if you're the Calgary Stampeders, for instance, who get 3 in the first 17, you could take a flyer with that 3rd pick overall that you have in the draft. With the first 2, you don't really want to be fishing and hoping. You want to get something secured that is coming to camp.
Yeah, especially a team like Calgary, because they do have, actually, I'm higher on Calgary than I think most people are right now. I know they're sort of the punching bag of the league at the moment, but they do have holes and they do have some gaps in Canadian talent, and they need guys to get out there, not maybe right away, but pretty soon.
Well, the Stampeders, if we want to talk about it, they went to Toronto to make some trades to get this sorted out, and also picked up some FAs out of the Argonauts. It's kind of the reverse of what happened. The Argonauts were pulling all the Stampeders east.
Yeah, the Argonauts are the new Stampeders, and we've seen that over the last couple of years. We now know how Calgary felt when we were watching all those Stampeders come here in the 2021 and 2022 seasons, and it was bizarre. We hadn't really seen anything like that. It just seemed like everyone was a former Stampeder. But yeah, over the last 2 years, the league has been picking apart the Toronto Argonauts. I think the Edmonton Elks are probably the most to blame this season. They basically took all of Toronto's defensive line out west. So yeah, certainly people can now empathize here in Toronto with the Calgary Stampeders and what they went through.
And you're exactly right about that defensive line. The Argonauts just literally got picked over. Jared Brinkman goes to Edmonton, but there was more than that actually went west. And I'm just wondering, I know you were very high on the depth of that defensive line, but do they have that depth now that can start?
They do. It's different. The depth got taken away largely. That was, the guys, a lot of those guys were next man up. Like that was sort of, Ceresno was obviously, he's a star. Robbie Smith is a star. But Brinkman was one of those next man up guys, and he really shone. He's looked amazing in his last couple seasons. But to lose like $1 million worth of defensive linemen to one team is pretty unusual. But the Argos have compensated for that. Derek Parrish, they felt very good about. Part of that, the Calgary trade, Flo Remolade going to Calgary, Cam Judge coming back to the Argos, and Flo, of course, going back to the Stamps. That's such a weird trade, isn't it? Where these guys, they've been on the other team already, and now they're going back again. It's just bizarre to me. they felt like they could do that. They felt like they could let flow go because they've got this guy Parrish who really shone brightly last year and didn't have a ton of playing time because you're not going to take a Remilade off the field very often. He's a guy they felt very confident in terms of where the rest of the starters are coming from. A lot of them are former Rough Riders. You got Lanier. You got Brian Cox, of course, there, Christmas in there too. And then there's a ton of Americans that I'm really excited about, interested to see. And they only really need one or two of them to show something. And I think their D line is going to be okay. So yeah, it's a huge loss. There's no question. You can't gloss over that. They had four really good players walk out the door, one to Calgary and three to Edmonton. But I do feel like they've done a pretty good job patching the holes that were left. And it's not going to be the same D line. It's not going to be that Toronto Stock Exchange as I called them over the last two seasons. But they will be a good professional defensive line with some possibilities and some exciting Americans that are coming up here for the first time.
You bring up the fact that there will be some new people making their way north. And I'm just wondering, when you're a Toronto Argonaut representative and you're going down and recruiting, does that help you because you're from Toronto? It's more of a name city. Do more people say, well, I understand where that is. I know them from other leagues. So maybe Toronto is an easier destination to sell?
I don't want to shortchange the Argos scouting staff because I think that the credit has to go, like it's more than just come play in Toronto. Like they do a great job of getting down there and talking to so many different guys, and their talent evaluation really is top notch. I think it's easier a little bit to get your foot in the door, at least, because a lot of these American players, like you've talked to some of these guys over the years that prior to coming here really knew nothing about Canada, didn't even really, knew what direction it was in, and maybe that was about it. It's just not something that's on their radar. And then suddenly they get a call and they're coming up here. It's way easier to go to a city you've heard of. And I think Montreal is in that too. I think Vancouver is in that. I think those three cities probably have a little bit of an edge with some guys. For a lot of these players, a lot of them know that, going to their last year of college or whatever, the NFL probably isn't a path, and they do start looking. And I think they're excited to hear from any CFL team. They just want to play football. Like a lot of these guys that come up here, they just want to keep playing. They don't want their careers to end in college. Yeah, maybe with some guys, like I said, it's easier if you're Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. But I think ultimately most of these players, they've started looking, they've started talking. Agents have mentioned things. So maybe it's not that big an advantage.
I'm brought to James Vaughters, and you're talking about guys that want to come north. And James Vaughters, who was a guy that had started in the CFL, made it to the NFL, had his time there, said, I'm good. I want to come back home. Had a couple seasons with the Stamps. Now he's in Winnipeg. But he seems to be an indication of what the CFL can be. It's also guys that have had NFL experience that want to extend a career. They're looking to say, okay, yeah, I've still got a lot left in me. Maybe my ops aren't down in the NFL anymore, but that doesn't mean I'm not a player.
Yeah, and I love that because that tells you right away, like it's one of the hardest things to evaluate when you're evaluating talent is how much players care about the game, because that's hugely important. And the difference between the CFL and the NFL is it's razor thin. It really is. And so if you don't love football, then you're just not going to make it up here because you're not going to be motivated the same way that you were when the paycheck had a few more zeros on it. For guys that choose, the guys that say, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, I want to keep playing up here. Like that to me is such a good sign when you see that from a player. I love guys like that they want to play ball. And they know that here's the place to do it. This is going to be a place that provides them an opportunity to keep playing high quality football. It's hard not to cheer for a guy like that.
The other knock against the NFL, if you want to call it that, is it is big business, where the CFL not necessarily is. Because of the economics of it, it's a far different demand.
I think you're right there. There's something, I don't know, it feels like I was gonna make a comparison to college football, but that's not really the case anymore either with NIL deals and all the money that there is. That's a bigger business than almost anything. There is sort of, a purity, a passion that you see in the CFL from players, from fans, from front office and coaching staff and everywhere else. Like everybody loves the game.
Speaking of loving the game, we know that the Argonauts must be loving it because you think back to 2017, that's 3 Grey Cups that this team has won in the intervening years, and they've only missed 2 East finals.
They're very good at winning Grey Cups lately, and it's been, but that's been it's so funny. Like being out here, the contrast. I have a lot of acquaintances who live just down the road and are Hamilton Tiger Cats fans, and it's just to I think for Argos fans, there's almost as much joy in seeing the Ticats not win Grey Cups over the last 26 years or whatever it's been now, as it is for all the Grey Cups that the Argos have won in that time. And they've had really good fortune as well. They haven't lost Grey Cup games that they've been in. That's the thing too. And so they do seem to have piled up recently. There's been a lot of winning here, but it's the coach. You included 2017, but really it's the Coach Dinwiddie era. Like that 2017 team was sort of the end of a different phase, and that it was a great team, a really fun team to watch. But they weren't the same as this group. There aren't, of course, any players still playing from that group. But when Dinwiddie came during the pandemic and started building that team, and he and Pinball and Murphy and everybody started putting this thing together, really since then it has been a lot of winning. Like you said, it's the 4 East Finals, the 2 Grey Cups, winning or finishing first place in the Division 3 of 4 years. This is a really quality organization. After that disastrous 2019 season, they have completely flipped it, and the fans here are loving every minute of it.
And I'm thinking too, in those Grey Cup wins, if there's one commonality among all three that they've had in the last few years, something happens in the fourth quarter to change everything, whether it's a fumble that goes back for a touchdown, an interception, a blocked field goal, something in that fourth quarter the defense does, and the Argonauts win the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I know. It's edge of your seat stuff, right? There's no blowouts, there's no easy way. Like I know the score got a little bit out of hand this year, but it was a close game the whole way. But yeah, it's something exciting, and you never know who the quarterback is going to be, how that game is going to end. There's been a lot of drama with that as well, where you had McLeod Bethel Thompson out there, you have Chad Kelly out there, you have Nick Arbuckle out there. Who knows who's going to be out there for the Grey Cup or for the season for that matter? And that's where I think you have to give Coach Dinwiddie so much credit to be able to adjust as he had. We know how important quarterbacks are in this league, and for him to have a different starting quarterback for each of his 4 seasons to go into Grey Cup games and ultimately have to win it with a guy that you weren't counting on initially is in the fourth quarter, to have that come together like that. You have to tip your hat to him and his coaching staff. They've done a phenomenal job. They've been a huge part of all this winning over the last 4 years.
That backup quarterback role, it's got to be one of the most dubious spots to be in, because everyone thinks you can play. That's why you're the backup. But then when it comes time to play, they go, uh-oh, it's the backup.
Yeah, I know. Well, not just that, but like the mentality. Like I don't know how it's so tough to program yourself like that, to prepare every week like you are going to be the guy, because you have to. If you don't, you get in there, you're in so much trouble, and that may be it for you. The life of a backup quarterback can be really short. You get tested once, that might be it. And so you have to legitimately prepare every week as though you're blocking everything out and you are the starting quarterback. And that way, if you do get in, then you're ready to go. But not getting the reps, not getting the press, not getting the familiarity with your own teammates, all that stuff, it's so tough. And that's why it's so impressive to look at a guy like Nick Arbuckle. Last year, there they are in Montreal, in the East Final, and there you are halfway through the game. Suddenly, oh, you've got to go get us to the Grey Cup. And then a week later, there you are in the Grey Cup as the Grey Cup MVP. Like, it is, what a weird world that is to be a backup quarterback and to have your number called like that. Like, it's a dream situation for Arbuckle. Yeah, so often you're just you kind of go unnoticed. You're just sitting there holding a clipboard and doing your thing. But yeah, bizarre world.
In that East Final, and it's a great thing you mentioned it, because when Chad Kelly goes down with that broken leg, you kind of think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? When Arbuckle gets out there, the offense doesn't contract. They still go after it. Dinwiddie says, look, we got to win this game. I don't care who's there. You're going to go win it for us.
Yeah, and they didn't have much time to adjust, right? That's a second half thing. And so it wasn't like, okay, let's regroup and figure this out. And so they've got their play sheets and all the stuff they worked on that week were with Chad Kelly in mind. But that's where you have to trust your guy, Nick Arbuckle, that he's going to be up to speed. He knows his stuff. I can just throw him in there and I don't need to change everything. Now, that said, that's not a full game's worth of a game plan, because we did see in the Grey Cup, Dinwiddie had changed a lot of stuff. Like, that man did not sleep the entire week of Grey Cup because he was getting a different quarterback ready and getting everything he could ready for Nick Arbuckle in that Grey Cup game, because he does a really good job of that too. We've been, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but we've been able to see Coach Dinwiddie prepare for games with a variety of different quarterbacks from Cam Dukes and Brian Scott and Chad Kelly, McLeod Bethel Thompson, Nick Arbuckle. It seems like someone new is at the helm every week. And he does customize, he does tweak the game plans for them. There are very specific things he seems to like for each of them. But in that situation, yeah, they couldn't take their foot off the gas at that point. Montreal would have come back and won that game. And so they had to keep pushing downfield. And those couple throws that Arbuckle made that were just on the money. And there's a big sigh of relief from the Argos fans. And, Hoagie and I watching up in the booth there in Montreal, we weren't sure what we were going to see. And then there goes Arbuckle firing it deep downfield over the middle to Unger. Like, all right, that's one way to go about doing it with your backup quarterback.
Well, and Arbuckle, too, it's been said he tends to overthink things, and that's maybe what's cost him in some games. In that East final, he's just coming off the bench saying, no pressure, I just play.
Yeah, and that's what I almost worried about that with the Grey Cup, but it's kind of the same thing because that week is such a whirlwind that he didn't have time to think. And I've heard that about him as well, and I think that's he's a guy that really likes to prepare. He wants to have thought through everything, and I know some people have said that ultimately is too much. He overthinks. I think he's talked about that as well. I seem to remember reading an interview that he did where he talked about over preparing sometimes, and it's hard to do that in football, and that tells you how obsessive he is about preparation and being ready. But yeah, I think you're right. I think something about just like go, you're in. You don't have time to think. It's just instinct. And, he's been playing football since, I'm sure he was, 2 or 3 years old. And so to have him out there not thinking, just go play the game. Grey Cup week was like that because what a circus it is, right? They fly from Montreal, they land the plane, suddenly they're in Vancouver. You've got press obligations. You're trying to install these new plays. And before you know it, it's kickoff. He didn't have time to overthink that at all. Yeah, I think that might have worked in his favor.
And the other thing I love about Ryan Dinwiddie is the whole business of going into the locker room and finding that toonie that he had taped underneath the locker, bringing it out, and I expected to come back to get it. Like the psychology that he uses to get that team believing is fantastic.
Don't you love that story? I've forgotten about that until you just brought it up. Like that's such a great. I love the fact that it's a toonie too, right? Like when they're there in Vancouver, tape a coin. We're coming back to get this. Yeah, what a move. Now, it's not as good a story if you don't make it back to the Grey Cup, but yeah, I love that. I love the motivation of taping that coin there, and there they were to collect that coin again, and still sitting there, right? Like you put it in a place where no one's going to touch that. I love stuff like that. Like that. Yeah, that was moving. That felt like a movie moment.
Well, and beyond that, you could see in that locker room that guys bought in right then and there. The energy in that room went way up.
It was funny, because the Argos were pretty big underdogs going into that game, going into the Grey Cup game, and I understand why. The Argos really didn't believe they were underdogs. And I know this is said a lot. Teams always say, we believe in ourselves. I think a lot of times in professional sports, teams just say that, and that really wasn't the case. Like these Argos, having talked to a couple of those guys, there wasn't really any doubt. They felt so confident. That defense felt so confident that they could do whatever. They were going to be fine. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. And the offense trusted in Nick and felt like between Nick and the plan that Coach Dinwiddie put out there, they really weren't worried at all. They felt like pretty comfortable and confident, and they played that way.
This offseason, it's been quiet. Other than free agent movement, it's been quiet around the Toronto Argonauts. There's no Chad Kelly news. Everyone seems to be focused on repeating as champions. And it must be a different sort of feel around the whole place.
Yeah, I'm sure they're relieved about that. That can't have been easy last year, certainly. There's a lot of stuff to do. They had a lot more holes to fill than they did last year. And so that has been the focus from the front office. Like, let's make sure we've got a Grey Cup caliber team out there to go and support. And really, it's the defensive side of the ball. Like the offense is largely the same. There's a couple of changes, but for the most part, this is going to be the same offense out there, and they're going to be able to put up points. But yeah, that defense was sort of stripped and sold for parts, and so it has been a rebuild. And I really like where they are. I like the pieces they've got in place. There's a couple questions like position wise, where I don't know which one of two guys they might go with. But for the most part, this looks pretty set to me. And I think you're going to see good defensive football from the Argonauts yet again this year. I don't think they'll be last year's defense, I don't think they'll have to be with the continuity they've got on offense here.
Well, anytime you've got Wynton McManis anchoring a defense, then you know you're in good stead.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure. I really didn't think they were going to bring him back. I know how much they love Winton. I know how much the city loves Winton. I wasn't sure that that was the move they were going to make because I knew it was going to be one guy that was basically like one of the stars they could bring back. And I thought they might go more defensive line there and feel like, well, maybe we can find another middle linebacker. Maybe Isaac Darkangelo steps into that role, what have you. But I don't think there was actually any question at all from the front office. I think they knew their plan from the get-go, and they felt like, yeah, we got to bring Wynton McManis back. And now that it's done and signed, it makes sense to me. I understand the leadership qualities that he has. He's different, right? It's not just his play on the field, which is excellent. I think we all know that. We've seen that. The command that he has in the room, and that's new. That's something that he had to do last year for the first time as a pro. He had other voices in the room the season prior and the season prior to that. And last year, because of all the leadership that left Toronto in last year's exodus, he kind of had to become the leader. And he sort of looked around. He's like, I guess I'm the guy. And he really stepped up and delivered in that capacity. And I think the front office looking at that, it's like, yeah, we can't let that guy go anywhere.
Well, you look at his playoff run, every game he had either a turnover or he was involved in creating another one.
Yeah, he's a human highlight reel. I don't know what it is. Like he's a magnet for the football. And it's so timely, right? It's not just that he has these highlight reel plays. It's that they come when the game's on the line. There's so many of those. Going all the way back to his first season in Toronto, he's just found ways to close out games, whether it's out on the East Coast and it's a last minute pick six to beat the Riders. He just seems to find that moment to elevate his game and make a huge play. And he believes he walks around like that. He believes he will, and yeah, sure enough, he makes it happen.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Now, with the Argonauts moving into training camp, what do you think is going to be their focus? You talked about the offense being together, but there's going to be a lot of recruiting on defense. But what do you do to gel everybody when you get into camp?
Yeah, that's tough. Like with the defensive staff is going to have their work cut out for them, and there's some changes in that staff too. And I think right away, Coach Ivan is going to have to start getting these guys to gel. And what I like about their training camp setup these last few years at the University of Guelph is it really is conducive to building a family environment. It feels like university again because you're at a university, so they're in the dorms and they're practicing on that University of Guelph field. They've got great facilities there too. Like Guelph has put so much money into that football program in recent years. It feels a lot like a U.S. facility, and so it's very familiar feeling to a lot of these guys. And so I think that will help. And the more reps you can get with these guys. And so right from day one of camp, it's not just the time off the field and bonding there, but getting those reps together and getting that familiarity. I think what's nice is that unlike in some years past, like especially 2021, for example, like they really do know who the guys are going to have to be. It's going to be this guy or this guy. And so getting those guys playing together, building those relationships on the field, I think that's going to be huge. They're not doing that on both sides of the ball. So they've got a bit of time. It doesn't necessarily have to click week one because I think this offense is going to hit the ground running week one. So the defense can take a little while to get things together. And that long CFL season, you don't need to go 18-0. They can build as they go. And I expect the defense will be a bit of a work in progress for a few weeks. And I think that's okay.
You touch upon them being in university dorms. The Saskatchewan Roughriders come to Saskatoon to set up their training camp at the University of Saskatchewan. The Ottawa Redblacks are going to be in Kingston. Teams are starting to do that. And I think you touched on a really good point about getting people together, getting people to know each other.
Yeah, it works really well. Like having spent a lot of time at Head Guelph over the last few preseasons, you see it. Like it just feels different. And, having covered other training camps and preseasons where it does feel a lot more temporary, I know it's just not the same. And so, yeah, teams are going to that. I love that the Redblacks are using Queens. I think that's great. They've got a great facility there too. A lot of money has been put into that program, and that stadium's awesome. So, yeah, I think that's smart of them. And trying to take some of that Kingston fan base away as well. Yeah, that's a great move. I would love to see every team embrace that sort of philosophy because you've got all the facilities there. Like, why not? Every CFL team's got a university just down the street where they can do that with essentially.
Well, with the Stampeders, of course, they're playing right at the University of Calgary.
Yeah, yeah, that's a bit different, but yeah, I guess it would feel less like a like a cozy road trip and maybe less college camp. But it's same idea, I guess.
The draft board is coming out. Do you see anybody on that board that you think is going to be, that's one person they're going to have to get?
Yeah, I don't. There's not one, and I'm still working through my draft board. I've narrowed things down. I'm down to like I try to always get down to 100, and that's sort of this is the 100 players I feel really comfortable. I know everything about, and I can put them in order. And I'm not quite there yet. We still got a couple weeks. I'm down. I think I can look here in front of me. I'm down to 109. So I am working my way down, and I'm still juggling the order around. The nice thing about the Argos is they don't have any immediate needs. I think you see some trends. Like when I started kind of putting together a depth chart, there's some changes. Like they really don't have a lot of Canadian defensive linemen, for example. You basically got two, and I sort of forecast them more as being more special teams contributors, not guys that you're looking to dress and start on the D line. And so you look at a positional group like that, and you say, well, do I eliminate that group? Are they not like they just want to go American along the defensive line, or is that a huge need where they don't have starting caliber Canadian defensive linemen? They need to bring in a bunch. So, you do have to weigh that a little bit. But what it looks like to me is the Argos are going to go Canadian heavy on the offensive side of the ball. It looks almost certain like they're going to be dressing 4 Canadian linemen, and they maybe even have the bodies, the numbers to be able to do 5 if a guy like Sage Dockstader can get in there at the right tackle spot. Because I really don't know what they plan on doing at right tackle. And so if that's the case, well, now you're looking along the lines of O linemen and maybe adding there. On the defense, it's aside from the will linebacker spot where they've got like 8 guys on every other position. It's a guy here, a guy there, and I really don't know how to read that. So it's been tough for me, kind of trying to get inside the mind of Pinball Clemens and John Murphy and sort of think, where are they targeting here, or is it just truly going to be best player available? And that's the way they've approached the last few drafts. I don't really feel like I have reason to think they'll go any other path than that. There's not one player that stands out because I think it's going to be what falls to them. Like last year, I don't think there's any way they thought they were getting Kevin Mittal with the 5th pick that they had. I think they would have bet the bank on Ottawa taking him 2nd overall. I certainly thought Ottawa was going to take him. They go a different direction. There's Kevin Mittal sitting waiting for you at 5, and like, well, I guess that's our new draft plan because he was the most talented player at that time. I figure they'll probably do it the same way. They've got the luxury, maybe one of those quarterbacks, maybe they pull the trigger on that. That's an exciting possibility. But there's a bunch of great linemen that I really like, offensive and defensive linemen. There's a couple of really nice DBs in there too, but I just don't know how they read that, if that's part of their plans. It's a wishy-washy answer, I know. I haven't really, called it anyone specific for you, but it's true. It like really could go in any direction.
3 down. You and the coach, JC Abbott, you guys are going to be doing something for the draft. Talk to me about it.
I'm so excited about this. We did this last year. We just sort of put it together. We ended up getting a ton of viewership there. And he approached me again this year and said, hey, you want to give this another go? JC is a draft wizard. I have so much respect for that guy. His talent evaluation, but it's he's a lot smarter than I am. And he has an ability just to stack information like that. And as soon as someone's drafted, he's got 1,000 things to tell you. I've got my notes and I'll be there doing my thing too. But you can watch us on a live stream. If you want to watch the entire draft, just go to 3 Down Nation and you can find a link on draft night to bring you right to us. And we will tell you everything we know about every single pick of that draft, all the way from the first pick through to the last.
Tell you a little secret. Last year I had TSN on one screen and 3 Down on the other.
Yeah, it's 3 Down does such a good job of the draft coverage because they'll have, everyone is going to, Hodge is going to be going and Dunk is going to be going. They're all doing their things and you're going to find immediate information on the site. And then if you watch JC and I on the broadcast as well, hopefully we can provide you with some entertainment.
I'm sure you will. Well, now let's get back to the draft itself. Teams sometimes, when they have a really deep roster, can look up and down the draft board and say that they could pick up somebody that we could develop. And where do you think that leaves the Argonauts?
We've seen the Argos do that over the last few years where they'll take a guy they know is going to be in the NFL for a while, like Jared Wayne, for example, a couple of years ago in the draft. Like that was their first draft pick, and he's still playing for the Houston Texans. Maybe he ends up here at some point. When you've got that kind of depth, it is worth a gamble like that because you see the impact when it does work, because that's what happened with Ryan Hunter, of course. And Sage Dockstader, another one of those guys that spent a few years down south, comes up here, and we know the difference that Ryan Hunter made, one of the best offensive linemen in the league, if not the best offensive lineman in the league. That was a pick they had to wait years for. They're hoping that Sage Dockstader can come in and do that same thing too, and maybe one day Wayne will walk into the building that same way. It is a luxury that not every team has. And so I do applaud the Argos for having built all that talent through the 2020, 2021 drafts. And it's been those two classes that have really helped, stockpile talent at key positions and allowed them to kind of just say, yeah, we can wait for a few years for this guy. So yeah, we're talking about, Taylor Elgersma, you're talking about Curtis Rourke. They can wait a couple of years for those guys or wait for them to develop. That's intriguing. That's exciting. Both Ontario guys. I think that's pretty fun.
I mean, we've heard now that Trey Ford, for instance, turned down NFL offers to stay in Edmonton this offseason. There's a job. There's a future for Canadian quarterbacks.
Quarterback money's pretty good in the CFL. I know the CFL gets knocked a lot for the player wages, which really are much better than I think the average fan realizes. I think most of these guys do, make a pretty good living, and it's not NFL. I'm not trying to compare it to the NFL or the NHL, the NBA, but quarterbacks especially are paid very well in the CFL if you can be a star, and so there is a temptation there. Now, where it gets tough for the American quarterbacks coming in is that a lot of those guys have made a lot of NIL money in recent years, even from smaller teams. If you're the quarterback, you're sort of the guy. So you might have been making $1 million in college. And so, yeah, you are coming in, taking a huge pay cut, being asked to be the third or fourth quarterback in a camp. And it is harder to get those guys. So maybe now is the time to see that sort of, the rebirth of the Canadian quarterback, because these are guys that want to be here. And a guy like Trey Ford, who is turning down NFL opportunities for stability that he knows he can get in Canada, and them sort of building a team around him out there in Edmonton. I think that's a really attractive thing to look at. And so, maybe this is the start of something new, and maybe we'll see more teams, especially with these two guys that are going to be taken in this draft, in Rourke and Elgersma. We'll see how long it takes for them to get here and what their impact is. But this could be the start of something. Who knows? With Nathan Rourke, already out there in BC and Ford in Edmonton, maybe there's two other Canadian quarterbacks that will work their way into starting roles soon. Wouldn't that be awesome to have 4 of your 9 starting quarterbacks Canadians? Like, I know we've got a lot of stuff that has to happen between now and that occurring, but it's a possibility.
I'm trying to remember, just jog my memory. When was the last time we had 3 Canadian quarterbacks in the league? It might be the 1950s.
Yeah, it's but well before my time. Certainly, I can't. Nothing's coming to mind. I need a historian on here who would be much better versed at that than me. But
where are you, Steve Daniel?
Yeah, exactly. He would know right away. We could send him an email right now, and I'm sure he'd get back to me in about 5 minutes. So, yeah, that's a good question. But that is something that one of the kind of unexpected results of NIL money in the NCAA, maybe that is the rise of the Canadian quarterback in the CFL. We'll see.
Now, you bring up the NIL money, and this is really interesting to me, because if a guy has made that kind of coin in the States, okay, that gravy train is over. And if you're not in the NFL, what are you going to do? You're not going to, if you want to play football, what are your choices, right?
Those guys are usually pretty well connected. Like, it depends if you want to keep playing or not. What your passion is like. Often through the connections that you've made down there and fostered through the advertising that you've done because of that NIL stuff, like there are opportunities you can go to that will often generate, significant amount of money just as sort of a day-to-day job. Even, being a spokesperson or something like that, or to go into broadcasting. Again, quarterbacks are afforded opportunities like that. This goes back to something we were talking about earlier about that razor-thin difference between the NFL and the CFL. It's really tough if you have made a lot of money in the States, whether it's playing in the NFL, whether it's playing NCAA, making a lot of money and coming up here to make a fraction of that as a rookie. If you don't love the game, you're just not going to make it, because you need to love the game because you need to give 100% effort in that camp. Otherwise, no matter who you are, a top draft pick, a top prospect, a guy that played in front of 80,000 people every week in the SEC, whatever it is, if you're not giving 100% of your effort in the CFL, you will not make it because there's no one good enough to give 80% and still make it up here because the difference isn't that big. And so that's another reason I think it's going to be harder and harder to maybe get some of those guys up here because I think a lot of those guys that really don't have that passion for the game aren't going to give that same kind of effort, and they're not going to be up here long as a result of that.
And it touches on something. I had George Hopkins with the Calgary Stampeders, their equipment manager, and he talked about that very thing. These players that are coming out of college that are making big money, it's a bit of a shock to the system to come to the CFL and realize that kind of money just isn't there unless you are the starter. And so it takes some time for them to mentally get adjusted to the change.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people just aren't, it's hard. Like, think of that in your day-to-day operations, like whatever it is you do for a living, anyone listening to this, you sort of think about, what you do right now. And even if you love your job and you're passionate about it, if you have to go somewhere else and make significantly less, you would have to really love what you're doing to give that same effort that you're putting in now. And fortunately, the scouts in the CFL are really good at finding those guys and finding guys. Like, it's one of the things that you have to sort out really quickly as a scout is how high is that level of passion? Like how hot is that fire burning for football? Because if it's not there, then yeah, it's just not going to work out.
What is your schedule like now? What are you having to do to get yourself ready? And how much will you be spending in Guelph at training camp with the Argonauts?
As much time as I can. I love that process. Like, it's really fun for me. I love sitting there up in the stands with, I'm an old school, so I have the printed out rosters with 600 names on it and all these double numbers of, different colored jerseys and trying to figure out who everybody is in those first few days. But that's what I love, those first couple days where I don't even know the name. I'm just looking at a jersey. I'm like, who is 00 down there? And I'm watching what he does. And that's where you find guys. Like, my podcast co-host JB, I saved this text that I sent him, I guess 2 years ago now almost. The very first day, we were sitting at opposite ends of the stadium, and the very first day, I'm like, who is this guy? It turned out to be Qantas Stiggers. I'm like, this guy's in the wrong league. Like, how come no one else had a beat on this guy? And I look him up, like, oh, Qantas Stiggers. And like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Yeah, he stood out from day one, and the excitement of finding guys like that. And seeing guys playing at high levels, like Benji Franklin last year was one of those guys that, like, he stepped up, and that wasn't the guy I remember getting into a game or two in the previous fall. Like, he looked terrific. The excitement of that's what I look forward to most, and that's what I spend those first few days doing is little asterisks next to, like, hey, this guy looks like something. And Ralph Hawley was another one of those guys last year. Who stood out right away. So it is fun to see if you can peg a couple guys that will really turn into something. And sometimes they don't. Some guys will have great camps, look like $1 million, and it just doesn't work out once the lights come on. But that's a really exciting time of year for me.
And what about the regular season itself? For you, prepping to be in that booth, what is it like, and when does that transition usually begin?
To me, the transition's already happened. Like, I'm already kind of thinking about this year. I guess it's sort of the new year, and I think fans are a little bit like that too. Like, there was a lot of celebration around Toronto. Argos fans were, thrilled. Obviously, that's the goal, to win the Grey Cup, and they did that. And there was a lot of celebration, a lot of partying. But then once you get to the new year, you're like, okay, well, what's up next? Let's take a look at this team coming together. We got new guys to cheer for, new guys to break down and analyze. I think that page has already been turned. And now for me, like, the next step is just trying to figure out how this depth chart is going to work itself out and where there may still be some holes in the roster, positional battles that I'm really interested in. Like, there's one I'm excited about. We'll see how this works out. The idea of Tavares McFadden and Ciante Evans battling for a cornerback spot, I find really intriguing. There's going to be some great battles along that defensive line. Jordan Williams, who I really like, who had his season kind of derailed a bit last year due to injury, and then he ended up, his injury is what brought Ralph Hawley into the mix. He'll be there battling with DeMarcus Christmas, and going to be some battles out on the edge as well. There's some really exciting Americans. Andre Carter is one of them, guy that the Argos traded to get the rights to Andre Carter, defensive lineman, and they had to send fan favorite Dan Adeboboye to Ottawa to do that. And so they think very highly of this player. He'll be a really fun guy to watch in camp. So like for me, it's those battles and that excitement. And then once the roster is finalized, once it gets set, now we start looking ahead to the schedule and who's coming to town and where are we going next.
And looking at that Eastern Division last year, I mean, it was a little topsy-turvy. Ottawa finally making their presence felt. I mean, the Red Blacks, are going to be better. The Tiger Cats are probably going to be better. The Alouettes are looking for revenge. What is this East going to be this year?
It's going to feel like a bar fight, I think. I think all four teams believe that they are contenders right now. And I think that's when the CFL is at its best, right? Like and even in Toronto, as much hatred as there is for Hamilton down the highway, the East is better when both Toronto and Hamilton are good teams. And so, I expect Hamilton to really be impressive this year. I think they're going to put up a lot of points. I think they're going to be fun to watch. Those games will be fantastic. But yeah, Ottawa back in the fray, that's exciting. And they've made some really nice additions too. And I love the coaching ads they've made and Coach Fields going out there to run that defense. And so that's a nice staff working with some real talent. And Montreal hasn't got anywhere. We can't forget about them. They were a few plays away from maybe being in back-to-back Grey Cups. So, yeah, the East is going to be hotly contested, and it's anyone's guess as to how that order finishes out. Who misses the playoffs from that group? It just feels like all four of those teams legitimately feel like they belong there.
Well, Drew Brown showed himself last year that he could lead the Red Blacks, and now we've got Davis Alexander in Montreal. He's got his opportunity.
Yeah, that's exciting too. I don't know. Like they put a lot of faith in Davis Alexander that they really felt like he's the guy. I don't know that I saw enough from him. They obviously know better than I do. They see him every day and they watch him at practice. It's a little bit of a gamble, but we've seen this before. When you bring in a veteran backup, a guy like McLeod Bethel-Thompson, it's so tempting as a coach, even though the plan is Davis Alexander, when they get into training camp, and you've got a veteran that is able to pick things up immediately and make all the right reads. And, he sees cover 2, he goes here. He sees cover 3, he goes here. He knows right away. It's so hard for a coach. And these coaches always know their jobs are on the line every season. It's so hard to say, yeah, we're still going to go with the rookie. When we saw that play out a little bit in Edmonton last year, you see it every season. And so we'll see how that shakes down in Montreal. I'm curious to see how that all works out because it is tough. It is tough to go with that, to go with the younger guy in that situation.
Interestingly, Edmonton, it was McLeod Bethel-Thompson who had all the starts, and then they went to Trey Ford.
Yeah.
Here he's now the backup. And can you blame Bethel-Thompson for what happened in Edmonton? He put up a lot of points. They just didn't win.
Yeah, and I don't know where to point the finger. I don't point it at Bethel-Thompson, and I don't point it at Ford. I think the situation was a little bit of a mess. Like they got off to a rough start. I think there was a lot of turmoil there, maybe behind the scenes as well. But that's an example like what we're talking about, where you've got Trey Ford, who's the exciting young quarterback, but as a coach, you're seeing McLeod Bethel-Thompson sort of do this sort of sure thing. I understand why they made that call, but clearly Ford was the guy to go with. You saw how that team caught fire once they made that switch. Yeah, it's one thing to say it, sitting 100 miles away or thousands of miles away from Edmonton. It's easy to say that sort of armchair quarterback. But yeah, as a coach in that situation, I've been in similar situations myself as a coach, and I can tell you it is very tough to go with someone who's less proven when all eyes are on you and your decision making. So yeah, we'll see how Montreal handles that. I'm excited that's not a Toronto problem.
Ben Grant, thank you so much for being on the podcast once again. You're on TSN 1050 with the radio call of the Toronto Argonauts. Where else can people find and follow you?
Well, you can listen to the X's and Argos podcast. JB and I get started on our season in a few weeks' time. You can occasionally find me on 3 Down Nation as well. So if you want to follow me on Blue Sky, it's Coach Ben Grant, and that's where I'm doing most of my social media stuff right now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. I love to do it anytime.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.